Okay, we're on the second Mishnah. Well, actually, yeah, the second Mishnah on Chaf Aleph on Beis. Shloisha Devarim, Rabbi Gamliel Machmir, Kedivrei Beis Shammai. There were three halachas that Rabbi Gamliel was Machmir, like the words of Beis Shammai. Now, again, if you remember Beis Shammai, guys, he doesn't say mitoich. We have this unbelievable din of Beis Hillel, mitoich shehutru l'tzayrich, hutru shaloi l'tzayrich, and that permits us a multitude of halachas on Yontif. Conversely, Beis Shammai only permitted cooking. He did not say mitoich. So therefore, to heat up water or something, that would not be such a good thing. So Shloisha Devarim Rabbi Gamliel Machmir Kedivrei Beis Shammai, Ein Toinim Esachamim. You can't go ahead and heat up water for what? For hot water. L'chatchila, for what purpose? B'yantiv. Ein Zayk v'nesa menorah. You can't put up a menorah b'yantiv. Ve'ein oifin. You can't go ahead and bake pitin gritzen, thick bread. El Rakik, and only wafers. A number of Gamliel shall base Abalei oifin pitin gritzen. They never went ahead and baked fat bread. We're going to see this is because of tircha. That shouldn't be matriach itself on Yantif. El Rakik, and only wafers. What can I do? Because in fact, you are able to bake thick bread. And Makil and Chol Yisrael, Liyos oifin pitin gritzen v'chavirin. They map one themselves and they make everyone that they can go ahead and bake thick bread, everyone. And charorin and put directly on coals. Now it says the Gemara, Heichi Dami, what are we speaking about over here? When we said you can't go ahead and cook water. Why can't you cook water? If you made an erev tavshilin, my time in the Beis Shammai. What's the reason Beis Shammai says that what? That you can't cook water. If you didn't make an erev tavshilin, my time in Beis Hillel that you can. So you didn't leave an erev tavshilin, and still Beis Hillel will be mekel. So in other words, the person didn't leave an erev tavshilin, but what's necessary for his basic necessities in life, even without an erev tavshilin, would be permitted according to Rav Huna, right? Rav Huna l'tamei. This is Rav Huna going according to his reasoning. Dam Rav Huna, mi shelo yiniach erev tavshilin, oifen loy pas. He's able to go ahead and the oifen pas achas, the time like deira achas umadlikin as haner, and you can go ahead and be madlik ner. In other words, you can't. We won't allow you to do everything that you normally would be able to do had you made the erev tavshilin, but in absence of the erev tavshilin, you could do the basic minimal. You have a little pot of water, you have some and time them. And it says something very interesting, madlikin es haner. So top places it says from here. Listen to this halacha. It says places mikan mashma shetzarach lahaske bebirches erev tavshilin yehei shari leveshulei to cook, ulafuye and to bake, uladluke and to light. In other words, even without an erev tavshilin, you won't be able to even light the candle. Then bishvil adlaka is hana. Okay, so the Taisa says that the lashon of that we say adluka, we do say that lashon is based upon this gemara that a person should go ahead and you be able to be madlik. So one teretz. The Beis Shammai did not permit you to cook water because there was no erev tavshilin. Beis Hillel permitted you to cook water like Rav Huna. Rav Huna shita that if you forget an erev tavshilin, we'll let you do one thing. So you can cook water. Rabbi Yitzchak says, even in addition to what Rav Huna permitted, he said, after Seilon like that cotton, you could even broil up a little fish. Tanya Mihachi, a brisa like that substantiates Rav Huna shita, Mishlei niach erev tavshilin, oifen le pas achas, fitoin le kedera achas, or malikin le yasaner. You'll be able to bake one bread, insulate one pot, malikin yasaner, umachmin le kita and echad, heat up one flask of water, v'yeshoyim maf soilin like that cotton, like Rabbi Yitzchak, even broil one fish. Rabbi gives a different teretz. He disagrees with the teretz of Rav Huna. He says, and again, the kasha with machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel about heating up water. Did you make an erev tavshilin or not? Lo'ilam sheniach, you did leave an erev tavshilin. All right, so if you left an erev tavshilin, why didn't Beis Shammai permit it? Says the Gemara, the shiny hatmona. Mon is different. He won't let you do hatmona. Why won't again? He ain't time the mesach. We said that not cooking. He won't let you insulate chamim. Why not? The mucha milsa that daite the Shabbat of it. In other words, if you're going ahead and cooking without erev tavshilin, erev yantif, it's not mucha at that point in time. You're doing it for Shabbos. You could be doing it for Yontif. Conversely, why are you doing Hatmana? Hatmana is not for the present. Hatmana to insulate is for the future. So clearly, the act of Hatmana would be for Shabbos. Shabbos. How could you go ahead and do that? Even with it, so that's why Beis Shammai says that Hatmana Yemuchim Milsa, that's not for today, it's for tomorrow. Therefore, he didn't permit it. Even with an Erev Tavshil. And Esri Abaya, Chananya Oimer, Beis Shammai Yoimrim. Beis Shammai is of the opinion, Einofen Ella Im Kain Erev Bepas. Again, remember, we're going to match up. You can only bake if you made pas. This was that Tosfos that Rabbi Rosenzweig we have with that sheet that even though the Gemara said you shouldn't use pas, right? Because it's something that is shchiach. In Malafin, but we said that since that Rabbeinu Tam Shita, that Tosfos that we should remember. Einofen Elam Kain Erev Bepas. Vein Mevashlan Elam Kain Erev Betavshel. Vein Taimnim Elam Kain Hoyulei Chamim Temunim Erev Yontif. It's the kasha. In other words, you want to make a chilik and say that you can't do hatmana even with an erev tavshilin. But we're saying, matching it up. If I have a baked item for my erev tavshilin, I could bake. If I have a cooked item for my erev tavshilin, I could cook. If I have an insulated item for my erev tavshilin, I can insulate. So you see that can't be the svara that that mucha milsa that's for the next day. It's for Shabbos, right? It doesn't work because you see over here, had you insulated in your erev tavshilin, it would work, despite the fact that you know it's for the next day. So therefore, back to the original teretz. What's the pshat in the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Why does Beis Shammai not permit you if you made an erev tavshilin? El lashon charot amar Rabbi going she'arav lezev le'arav lezev v'chananya he bali with Beis Shammai. Okay, let's match it up, guys. Hananya says A, B, C. If you do A, you can cook A. B, you can bake B. C, you can insulate C. So you know what I did? I did A and B, and I didn't do C. So when the Mishnah says you can't do atmana, it's speaking where you made an erev tavshilin, but you didn't go ahead and insulate. You made a baked good. You made a cooked good, but you didn't make an insulation good. Memela says the top Rashi, Shav lezev le'erev lezeh, Afu bishim l'bayayim l'shem erev. He baked and he cooked while it was still erev yontif. For the Erev, for like Tamim Chamim, but he didn't go ahead, it's Erev Shabbos, like Tamim Chamim, but he didn't go ahead and insulate hot water. He said the Mishnah, one of the chumas of Rabbi Gamliel was the Ein Zoik V'nes HaMenorah. You can't stand up a menorah. A menorah is a lamp. Why can't you stand up a lamp? What's the problem? My cover. Why is he also? So I'm not Chinna Bar Bisna. Hacha b'menorah shel Chuliyas Askina. We're speaking about a menorah that came of literally spines, like vertebrae. It was pieces. We had a Masechta Shabbos, right? It was broke in different parts. The michse kiboina. So if you go ahead and put it together, it appears if you're building. So Beis Shammai does not permit it, and Beis Hillel does. The Beis Shammai says yesh binyan b'kelim and yesh stira b'kelim. There's a din of binyan in kelim, not just in houses. There's din of stira. So since there's a din of binyan, if it falls down and it's going to be loose and you're going to put it together, you'll be chaya for bona, michse kabona. Beis Hillel Savrei, this we had the sheet many times. Ain binyan b'kelim, ain stira b'kelim. Right. So therefore, there would be no problem of going in and putting it back together. Ula ikla lebei Rabbi Yehuda. Ula showed up to the house of Rabbi Yehuda. Kom Shammai zokif la sharga. The Shammai went ahead and he stood up the lamp. Now, a sharga is a lamp. The lamp had a wick. Think about Aladdin's lamp. That's the best way. It's a piece of cheres. It has a hole in it. It's got a wick in it. And depending on the angle, you're going to be feeding the wick. If you put it this way, the oil will rush towards the wick. If you put it this way, the oil is going to go away from the wick, right? So he went ahead and he was zakif l'sharga. So what was the problem? If someone puts shemen in a ner, he's starting a fire. When someone takes away from the ner, he's chayiv for extinguishing. And by him going ahead, the shamis, and moving the ner, he was taking away from the flow of the oil to the wick. Thus, he should be over on mechabe. So, how are you permitted? How did you permit your shamis to do this? I wasn't paying attention. I didn't realize what he was doing. I don't disagree. In other words, it happened, and I don't disagree. This is what happened. Amar Rav, says Rav, Kinba Shari. Rashi says that you're trimming a wick. Taisa seems to say it's very geschmack. Guys, did you ever use cotton for your menorah? And it gets like a black bulb at the top of the cotton. And if you wanted to go ahead and burn brighter, you take away that little top. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? I use the cotton wicks by menorah. I use the cotton wicks by the menorah, and you get like pieces, little brecklech. And if you take away that breckel, that it causes it to burn better. So that's what, according to Taisus, is that what kinda is. According to Rashi, is you're snipping the top, that you should make charcoal to make. According to Taisus, you're taking away that little breckel. Benji, tell them what a breckel is. Right? You're taking the breckel to go ahead and taking the top so it should burn brighter. Heshi's not here. I have to pick somebody, right? Okay. Boy mine abba bar Marta me abaya. Mahu lichvois es haner b'fnei davar acher. B'fnei davar acher. Person, you know that person's not. It's not permitted to have tashma shamita, marital relations, when there's a light in the room. Can you put out on yontif? Can you extinguish a light for the purpose of davar acher, for marital relations, for tashmish? So amaloi. So Abaya told Rav Abba Marta, go to another room, go to someplace dark. It doesn't have another house. My Efshalasis, Mechitza so Lasas Mechitza goes Ainloi, Lasas Mechitza. My Efsha, Lichfaisalavas a Kli, put a Kli on top of it, dim it. Ainloi Kli Mai. Somebody else, bottom line is it's us. In other words, if there's no other option, it's usher. It's usher because, again, it's not permitted. Esive. Now you're telling me that sorche, you're telling me that for the needs of yontif, that you can't extinguish a fire. I'll show you maybe not like that. And this is going to lead to a constant kasha from the following brisa. Ein machbin es habekas kedei lochem aleha. If you have a burning splint, you have a piece of wood that's burning, you can't go ahead and extinguish the fire to save the wood. And if you're extinguishing this smoldering piece of wood, that it shouldn't smoke up the house, or to burn the pot, then mutter. So l'chayra, what do you see? For the purpose of yontif, not to smoke up the house, not to ruin the pot, you're able to extinguish the fire. So who adin, for the purpose of tashma shamita, you should be able to go ahead, Rod, and put out the fire. So how come to buy? You tell Abba Merema, how can you say no? So Amalei, Hahi Rabbi Yehudahi. So Abaya told Rav Abba Bar Marta, that is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And if you look at Rashi, who's this Rabbi Yehuda? Who are we talking about? He come in according to Rabbanan. So Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion, guys. The Omer Lekamon, he's going to say on Daf Chof Ches on the base, Machshirei Oichel Nefesh Shari, to preparatory, not Oichel Nefesh, but even preparatory steps are permitted. Similar to Rabbi Eliezer Demila, right? That to go ahead and preparatory steps, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion preparatory steps are also permitted. So this opinion that allowed you to put out the wood, not to smoke up the house, was the Das Yachid of Rabbi Yehuda, who we do not paskin like. And the Mela, you would not be able to have tashmish for the same reason, because that's called machshirei yomtiv. Ki kamina na l'rabbana. Back in the Gemara, I said my din, I said my psak, that it's asa to go ahead and put out the light for the purpose of tashmish according to Rabbana. Boy mine abaya me rabba. Ma'u lichbois es had dlaka b'yontif. You got a burning fire in yontif. What's the loch? Can you put it out? Now hechedik is takan in the fashas where it's a shiloh of skanas the fashas like kami boilay. There's no shiloh, right? The afilu b'Shabbos shari, even Shabbos rod, it's permitted. Ki kami boilay mishum ovid mamin. It can take a monetary loss. Can I put out a fire to avoid a monetary loss on yontif? My Amalei Aser said so. He said said Rabbi to Abaya, it's Asa Esibe. Now it's very interesting that Abaya is the one who brought this out to Abba Bar Marta, and now he's asking Rabba. It must be he got this. It must be that this Gemara took place first, and that's where he learned the halacha from. Because what does he say? Esive Abaya. So now Abaya is asking the same kasha that Abba Bar Marta asked him. Ain't machabenes habakas k'dei lachos love. You can't put out a log to go ahead and have machmanas in it. The mishlosh leisashin abayis the house get smoked up. Ayakadei muta. So why did Rabbi answer him? He Rabbi Yehuda he come in another Rabbana. So this Gemara must be what and taking place before. Can you go ahead and they used to put in the eye an eye salve on Yontif. Now we know that on Shabbos that there is a gezerah shchika samim manim. You may come to do teichin and grind, and that's the reason that refuah on Shabbos is not permitted. Ain't been Shabbos the Yontif elawad ela oichel nefesh b'vad. So here's the shaila l'chayra of can you go ahead and be kachol the einay Yontif. Now heichadik sakana if the sakana going rira ditza doma demaita ukadachas utachilas uchla. These are various diseases of the eye or the beginning of that disease. Let me boil that feel b'Shabbos shari. Even Shabbos you'd be permitted to it. It's getting better. Can you do it or not? It's also. No, it's basically this Gemara is asking like on Yontif, is there any kula the Indian things that are not tzarchei oichel nefesh? The heta is oichel nefesh. We say mitoich. To what extent do we say mitoich? Right now we saw already that anything that you could have done erev Yontif, we don't say mitoich. Anything we could have done erev Yontif, we don't say mitoich. And these l'chayre have nothing to do with oichel nefesh. So l'chayre they're also just like Shabbos is also, and that will be the continuation of this. Asive the same question. All right, that and they permitted and they gave the same teretz. That's Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going according to Rabbanan. We're permitted a guy to put in eye drops, this curl on Shabbos, some type of a medicinal eye medicine. It could be gufa not that he permitted somebody else. He himself permitted a guy to put it in his eye. Any need of a chayla a guy can do on Shabbos. The Amar of Amnuna called Davashem by Sakana. So over here, it's not a sakana. So you're telling a guy on Yontif again the extension of the Shabbos into Yontif. That's only if you don't help him. The winking your eye, you're helping to go. You're being Messiah. So if you're being Messiah, you shouldn't be able to put in the eye medicine on Yontif because you can't do it on Shabbos. So he told him. Amayman told Rashi, Ika Rav Zvid, the Koy Kavasef. There's Rav Zvid who held like you that Messiah is Asa. Vishani Lay, and I answered him, Messiah ain't by Mamish. I said Messiah is not is ain't by Mamish. Says Rashi, Messiah ain't by Mamish. Mishaina Oysa Malacha Mamish. Al Messiah Ma'at. He helps a little bit. Ki Hai, like in this case. Ubalavhu Misavda, and even without him it could have been done. Ain't by Mamish. So in other words, the din of Messiah means, guys, that you're helping the person do it, but the person could have done it without you. That's the Yisrael of Messiah. You hear, guys, Messiah means to help. Help doesn't mean that he could have accomplished it without you. In other words, if he couldn't have accomplished it without you, that's not Messiah. That's doing it. Messiah means he could have done it without you, but it's a little easier. So he could have put in the eye drops itself, But whatever you did, says Amema, I hold is okay, and therefore it's not a problem. He permitted it to go ahead and put in the eye salve, not through a guy, but on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So again, on the second day of Shnei Yom Shel Goliath, guys, you would have been permitted today to put in eye salve. Why? Because again, Sveika the Yuma, we know, and we even know which day it is. There are tremendous heterim on it today for dining of medicinal purposes. What about Rosh Hashanah? Guys, remember, what was the sugya of Rosh Hashanah? Was it a gezerah? Right? We passed that Rosh Hashanah was the gezerah. What was the gezerah? That maybe they're going to go ahead and they're going to bring the Eilis is going to come later on. And therefore, what? We'll keep the whole day Kaddish, and they make a mistake in the share. So once we kept thinking that Kaddish, we Magdish next day also. So it was one gezerah, and therefore we came up with the idea of Yoima Arichta. That again, that we've been through this, but hopefully we'll remember it because we've been through this. But Bez Hashem, I'll remind you all the time. It's not a problem. So if you don't remember, don't worry. Hopefully I'll remember. Anyway, so therefore you have now. So the second day of Rosh Hashanah, he wants to say, is like the second day of Yom Tov, like today. That's what he wants to say, because he's permitting to you use an eye salve. If it's one complete day, you won't be able to do it, right? You won't be able to do it if it's one complete day. It's, Rosh Hashanah is one Kedusha, you won't be able to do it. On the first day of Rosh Hashanah, if someone dies, then a guy can bury the person. And that was a tremendous chiddush. We said that, and we spoke about my father, Al Shalom. But an egg that's born on the second day, you won't be able to eat it, right? You said that the second day we're going to treat it the same way. An egg born the first day, you won't be able to eat. The second day, we can treat it the same way. Why? Because it's one kedusha. Says the top Rashi, guys. Hashem came to Beitzah, the kedusha achasein. So how in the world was a maimer permitting a person to go ahead and put the eye salve on the second day of Rosh Hashanah if it's one kedusha? The only inyan we treated Rosh Hashanah the second day like Shnei Yom Tov Shel Galyus was only the inyan mace. We covered the mace, but the inyan what anything else? It's one big kedusha. How could you let the person use the medicine? And if the Gemara no kirnadoi svili, I hold like nadoi, and the doi permitted I feel the second day of Rosh Hashanah. The army after Beitzah Mutta. What are you going to say that you made Elul in Ibiyah that year, and therefore you don't misupik which day it is, whether it's the first day or the next day? We never find Elul Uba. It was only on Rosh Chodesh Elul was Rosh Hashanah was never on the 31st day of Elul. It was always on the 30th day. Why it never ever came out. So therefore we know exactly what day Rosh Hashanah was. The third din of the Mishnah. So we had two dinim, right? We had the din of Taimin Sachamim. We said that was a din speaking where he didn't make an erev tafshilin for that particular item according to Chananya and Beis Shammai. We spoke about Ein Zoik V'Nesam Menorah, where according to Beis Shammai, Ein Binyan Yesh Binyan B'Kalim, and it was made of chulius, and you're putting it together. And that was the third din. Ein Oifin Pita Gritzen El Rekikin. You can make Pita Gritzen thick loaves El Rekikin wafers. He can make a pas ava on Pesach. They still permitted you make pas ava on Pesach. The kama pas ava, how much tak is pas ava? Thick. So in other words, lechem aponim was a tefach, and it's a matzah. Guys, lechem aponim was not chametz. People mistakenly, lechem aponim was not chametz. The shtei lechem was chametz. The lechem aponim was not chametz. They called the lechem, very good, that's English, right? Lechem upon him was the tefach, so you see that tefach can be what? In fact, it can be a tefach thick. So when we say over here, this could be a tefach thick. Maskal of Yosef, now you're telling me about the lechem upon him, that you're allowed a tefach thick. That was a tremendous kula, not by normal people and not by normal situations. The Gemara now is going to describe exactly the protocol of making the lechem aponim and how difficult it was. And then, because of the specifics that we're about to see, then and only then could it be a tefach thick, because we're not worried about chametz. But on Pesach, we're worried about chametz. You're going to allow a regular person to make it thick? Let's see what we got. Maskal of Yosef, remember this reason, if you're going to say by the kahanim that was reason in making lechem aponim, Yomer b'shein reason, we're going to say by a normal person. In Yomer pas amela, they rubbed it 300 times and they pounded it 500 times. Yomer pas shein amela, you're going to say that it could be a tefach. Why? By pas, that's why not worked so much. Im Amru be'etzim yaveshim, they from tes vav av, they did not use. They began. That was the last day of the wood. They would go ahead and dry it out. It burned so efficiently. Yomer be'etzim lachem. What are you going to say about etzim that are moist, that don't burn so perfectly? Imamru b'tana cham, a hot oven. Yomer b'tana tzainin. You're going to say, Imamru, we said by the oven in the base of Mikdash was hot all the time versus an oven that you heated up. Imamru b'tana shel mateches, a metal oven. The one in the base of Mikdash was metal. It couldn't be of cheres, guys. As cheres, then you have a problem of nicer. Yomer b'tana shel cheres. So in other words, all these reasons would be to make a distinction between a tefach of the lechem aponim and a tefach of a regular matzah. So because of this, you can't possibly say, guys, pas ava means a tefach. Even Beis Hillel would say it's not a tefach. And there's no dimion to lechem upon him because of the factors we just mentioned. Guys, we're good? Shalom Bacon, we're good? Great. I'm Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. Shaola says Rebbe be yichud. I asked Rebbe when we be yichud, when we're together, I asked Rebbe, Umanu, and who is that Rebbe? Rav. And I asked him, my pasava. Now we know it can't be a tefach. Clearly, we made that distinction. My pasava, pas meruba means a lot. It means we spoke about filling up the oven because it bakes better, right? So pas ava means filling up the oven. Beis Shammai didn't let you do it. It could be Amar of Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar of Sheilis es Rebbe biyichud, I asked Rebbe biyichud, Mani Rabbeinu Kodesh. It wasn't Rav, but it was who? It was Rabbeinu Kodesh of Yudai Nasi. My pasava, pas meruba. The same means that my correlate pasava. So it means a lot of pas. Why are we calling thick pas? Mishum the nafish belisha, because since you have so much, you have a lot of dough. You're going ahead. That's what it's called thick. When you're in the kneading process, it seems very thick. Inami ba'asri the haitana pas meruba pasava correlate. That's what they call pas meruba pasava, but not a tefach, guys. It means a lot. Michti mishum the katarach tirchad leit sarachu. Now, as we said, guys, look at me. If it's not a problem of chametz, you mentioned Pesach, right? And we said you can do a tefach thick. And you said, no, you can't do a tefach thick. So if it's not a problem, a chametz thicker problem, what is the problem? You're making a lot of it, right? That's tircha. In other words, it's nothing to do with chametz. You're making thin, but you're making a lot of it, correct? So you're making a lot of it, not like I said before, you're filling up the oven. I'm sorry about that. It's speaking about you're making a lot of it, and you're making it thin, that it should be chametz. So what's the isser? Guys, what's the Yisra tircha? Extra tircha, correct? If that's the case, why are you limiting it to Pesach? The tircha should be even to Shavuos and Sukkot. If it's not a chametz tikadin, why are you stating it in Pesach, guys? It has nothing to do with Pesach. It's a din in Hilchas Yontif. It's not a din in Hilchas Pesach. It's a din in Hilchas Yontif. Any Hilchas Yontif, you're not allowed to be matriach yourself. You're not to trouble yourself so much. Says the Gemara inside, Geshmak is anything. Says the Gemara. My area Pesach. Why do you care about Pesach? I feel nami. Any yontif you should not be able to go ahead and make pas ava, meaning pas meruba. Says you're right. Great, such a great kash to the territories you take can. Enachinami. The Tana be yontif the Pesach koi. The Tana was on Pesach, and therefore that's why he stated it. But enachinami, who had in Sukkos, who had in Shavuos. Tanya Nami a Brisa that says it's a universal Yom Tov Tikadin, not a Pesach Tikadin. From Pas Meruba be Yom Tov Ubesil Matir. And guys, no mention of Pesach, right? Guys, no mention of Pesach. Ein Oisim be Yom Tov. So you see a Brisa that's a din in Tircha and it's a din in Yom Tov. Now, he said 3 chumras. Now let's get Rabbi Gamliel saying 3 kulas. Afu Oimesh Shloisha Devarim Lahakol. Nechabdin Bein Amitais. You can go ahead and clean bein amitas. Remember, they would eat on beds, and the food would fall between the beds. So could you clean up the beds? Are you worried about the floor? You're being mashva gumais. In other words, you're going to be chaya for bona by going ahead and making the floor equal. In the fields, will be chayrish, but here in the house, it's bona, right? So he said. He would be makel that you can go ahead and be bein amitos, and let's call it a dining room. You'll be able to sweep the floor in the dining room. You'll be able to go ahead and put mugmar. That's an incense on Yontif. Again, the Gemara will explain all this. And the third case, and you make a helmeted or a gedi that looked like it had a helmet on Yontif. Acid in these cases. Let's go to the case of not be mechabit, but go through each case. Machloikis legamer. The machloikis is to put incense in clothing to make it smell good. Avalariach to smell that the house should smell good. Now we quoted a Gemara that in Gemara and Kesubis that oichel nefesh it has to be dova shava b'chol nefesh. We had yesterday We had the Shaila about Loit Beis Hillel, not yesterday, the day before. We saw a Taisvis, an important Taisvis, that even Beis Hillel permitted you to heat up water on Yontif to wash your feet. He would not permit you to go ahead and heat up water to wash all parts of your body. Why? Because when it says Eichel Nefesh, Dova Hashava B'chol Nefesh, and not everyone takes a shower. And we spoke about Bisman Hazeh, but it has to be something B'chol Nefesh. Now, not everyone's such a fine shmeka that his clothing have to have incense in the clothing, that he should smell good. So therefore, that's the machloikis. The machloikis is the gamer of a lariach, to smell incense. That would be something that seems to be dava shava b'chol nefesh, and we permit it as oichel nefesh. So you're putting the incense on coals and smelling. So you can't put clothing there, according to that's the machloikis. But you could go ahead to smell it. You could. Meisivei. If you can't clean between your beds on Yontif, they would. If they wouldn't do that, they would clean it Erev Yontif, then between the beds they would spread sheets. The next day, they would go ahead and remove the sadinim because it had been cleaned Erev Shabbos or Erev Yontif. So Amaloi in Cain, after Shabbos Mutalas Cain. It's not a din in Yontif. Even Shabbos should be able to do it. The Ein Manichin is a Mugmer b'Yontif. V'shel Beis Reb Gamliel Manichin. And Amr Reb Eliezer bar Tzaddik Pamim Harbi Nechnasti Acha Abel Beis Reb Gamliel. L'Choy Manichin is a Mugmer b'Yontif. They wouldn't put incense on Yontif. Elamevian Adaras Kois Shel Basel. They would bring these censers of Basel, iron pots with holes in them. They would put smoke, the incense in on Erev Yontif. And they would make holes in on Erev Yontif. The next day, and the orchim would come in. They would open them up. So it's kind of hard to believe that Amalayim came after Shabbos Mutalasas came. So it's kind of hard to believe over here that there's a machlokes in anything over here. In other words, if you look at Rashi explains the Gemara Shaila. In Cain, go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down. In Cain, his friends would argue on him. The after Shabbos Mutalasas came. In other words, guys, Rabbi Gamliel came up with a heter. Guys, what was his heter? You can sweep between the beds on Yontif. Yeah? You're describing now the Gamliel's house that they used to sweep it Erev Yontif, and they would put a sheet on it. And then in Cain, if that's what they did, no one would argue. Even on Shabbos, they would argue. You're allowed. Rabbi Gamliel was makel, that he permitted you to go ahead and use incense. And you want to say that is not in clothing. It's only what? It's only to smell. That's permitted. And then we have the report of people going ahead and Rabbi Gamliel's house, putting it in pots before you shot Yontif, and then opening them up. That you'd be open up even on Shabbos, you'd be able to do that. So who's going to argue on that? And yet Rabbi Gamliel's being makel. When Gamliel's makel, mashma, they are arguing. So therefore, your pshat that you wanted to say that no, the machloikis is by putting it in clothing, but everyone would agree by smelling doesn't wash, because it doesn't stim with what we just reported. So it says the Gemara, Ella here's pshat. If you want to learn the Rav Asi, here's the way I learn Rav Asi. Machloikas la riach. Machloikas is whether you can smell it. Aval legamer aser. But to go ahead and put it in your clothing is aser. So it's the machloikas is whether you can put incense on coals to smell. That's the machloikas. But to put it in clothing, that you can't do. That's aser. Now iboiluhu. Ma'ula ashin. What about going ahead and smoking? And that doesn't mean smoking. Doesn't mean smoking. It means smoke. Right? No, it doesn't mean that smoking. It means smoking Paris. It means Rashi says Paris may ba'ashem b'samim likloi tam haboisim. You put a fruit. You would go ahead and put the incense. You put the fruit. You want it to go ahead. Now we know that everyone says it's asa by clothing. What about, because that's not a davar shav b'chol nefesh? What about a fruit that people are going to eat? Is that shav b'chol nefesh or not? That's the shaila. Says the Gemara. Rav Yirmiyah Rav Aser u'Shmuel Amar Mutter. Rav Yirmiyah Rav say Asa. Shmuel says it's Mutter. Shmuel says that this is it's permitted. It's like nefesh, and even aniyim can eat it. In other words, Shmuel says, guys, just because I'll give you a good example. Can an ani afford a steak? Can't afford a steak, right? Would an ani be able to cook a steak on Shabbos? Of course he would. The reason he doesn't cook a steak because he can't afford a steak. The reason he doesn't eat aromatic fruit is because he can't afford it. But if he could, he would have it. So Shmuel says it's muta. That's considered a davar shava b'chol nefesh. Mefunik means even a guy who could afford it wouldn't do it. So even I could have afforded to go ahead and have my clothing perfumed, since not everyone does that, that's not a davar shava b'chol nefesh. Something that a person would do had he had the money is a davar shava b'chol nefesh. So therefore, Shmuel says it's muta to smoke fruit, to give it that aromatic flavor. That would be permitted. Rav Huna Amar Asa Mifnei Shemechaber. Now Shmuel says Huna says Asa is not because of the Eichel Nefesh din, is because when you go ahead and you put the spice on top of the coal, it's going to put out the coal a little bit. Only Rav Nachman V'nei Mamar Mifnei Shemaver. What about igniting the coal, igniting the spice? In other words, the spice is putting out the coal, but the coal is igniting the spice. So why you chayiv only for mechaber? You should be chayiv for mavir, for burning. I think my answer is I just picked one, but you really chayiv two. You chayiv one for putting out the coal and two for burning the incense, burning up the spice. Amar Yehuda al gabi gacheles asa. Going ahead and putting on gabi gacheles, that mechaber mavir will be asa. That's what we just described. Al gabi cheres. Let's say you have a hot piece of earthenware, which would heat up the spice. Then mutter, it'll be permitted, because Rashi says the kibui leka. You're not putting out any coal because there is no coal. And this havar is through a shinui. It's getting burnt up through a shinui klachiyad, and there's no issa deraisa, and therefore what you'll be permitted. Therefore you'll be permitted. Rabbi Omar al gabi cheres nami asa. Not only is it usher on a coal, it's usher on a pottery. Mishum dekam moiled reicha, because you're creating reicha. Rabbi of Rabbi Yosef Namit Shabayu sechufe kasa ashiroi biyumatava, to take a cup and put it of incense and put it over a silk beged on Yontav will be asa. My timer. Mishum dekam moiled reicha, because you're creating a smell. What about the difference in taking a piece of wood and rubbing it together and causing a spice? The koitmai, or cutting off the top, and beautiful difference. Hasam isa. Over there in the wood, the spice was there. You're just accessing it by going ahead and rubbing or whittling it. Over here, in the clothing, guys, there is no fragrance. You're putting it in. Mashenkin over there, by going ahead doing this, you're causing it, that's already there, you're causing it to escape. Rava says no. Rava says, Agabi gacheles nami muta. Biggest meko. Not only cheres, even gabi gacheles. Putting spice on coals is not a problem of three problems. Mechabe is not a problem. Extinguishing. Mavir, causing the spice to be burnt, is not a problem. And moiled reicha, and creating a flavor, is not a problem. All three things is not a problem. And his source is one of my favorite Gemaras in Shas. Muta, mididahave abisra agumre. It's no different than putting meat on a cue, right? You put meat, guys, you're putting meat on a charcoal barbecue, right? What's happening? Three things are happening. One, it's dripping down on top of the coals. Bimachaba. Two, the coals are burning the fat that drips down on it. And three, if you ever smell a good barbecue, you know it's moiled reicha, right? So all those, says Rava, all those are what are permitted. Baruch Hashem. Without Rava, guys, boiled chicken. Says the Gemara Vayta. Darish Rav Gevia mi beik sil a pischad ve'resh galusa. Rav Gevia in the house of Kasil Darshan, in the house of the Reish Galusa, we had this before. Keturah Shari, something called Keturah is permitted. The Gemara is grappling. What is Keturah? My Keturah It's kind of making knots to go ahead and form certain sleeves on garments. So that's Maisa Uminhu. If you might remember from Shira, guys, a Maisa Umin is not permitted. A knot that's a Maisa Umin, that is a Maisa of a craftsman, is not permitted. A sailor is not, anything that's a knot, Kersha Shel Kayama, or Maisa Umin, either one. This is a Maisa Umin, the Keturah you're describing. That would not be permitted on Yontif, because it's not permitted on Shabbos. And if Keturah is speaking about smoking something, this would be according to the opinion that it's asa. So how can you say it's mutter? You're putting it out. Very the same tablets we gave. But that's not a problem. We're speaking about putting a spice on a fire. It's mechaber. No, we don't care because we learned from a barbecue. It's not a problem. If it's smoking, asa, it's going to why the kamal recha. Not that it's mechaber. The other problem, it's moilid recha. You put the spice on, it creates a smell. Amravashi, Ona Amrisa Nele, Mishmei de Gava Rabba Misa Nele, Loilam Ashain, Umididhabi Abisagumei. It's only speaking at Keturah is permitted. It's speaking about going ahead, putting spice and smoking, causing smoke. And moilid recha, we don't care because it's the same as a barbecue. Okay, let's finish up. The third din in the Mishnah was the Gedima Kulis. Guys, the Gedima Kulis was the following. We know that the Korban Pesach, we on the Tesvav Nisan, we do not eat that night. We do not eat anything that's roasted, anything that's broiled, because it appears like kach and bachutz. So in Rome, there was a person named Tudis that he permitted and Gedima Kulis based upon this. Gedima Kulis is similar to Korban Pesach. You would have the carbon like this, and you'd have the entrails on top of it, and it looks like it's a helmet. So therefore, the Gemara says that he permitted, Rabbi Gamliel permitted it, but the Chacham did not. Voice of Gedima Kulis. Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer, Tudis Ish Roimi. Tudis was a doctor. He was a famous Talmud Chacham. Hiniges Bnei Roimi. He permitted the people of Rome lechol Gedima Kulis b'leil Pesachim. Tesvav of Nisan. He permitted them to eat this roasted gedi. Sholchulei Elmoli. They sent to him Elmoli Tudis Atah. If not, he would Tudis, and we held you in such high esteem. Because Rani Lecha neither would put you in Cherem. Sha'atam Meichel Es Bnei Yisrael Kotchim Machutz. You're feeding Bnei Yisrael Kotchim. This is not a carbon. You didn't bring it in the base of Mikdash. It views what ke'ein kachim. Thank you. Have a good morning to everyone. Moadim b'simcha.
Tomorrow night is not happening, right?